Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the Railway Children, because I recently spoke to Gary Newby to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Anyway, this is the interview, so after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years, the musical awakening in life. Anyway, this is the interview with Gary, who's going to tell us everything. Anyway, Gary, it's over to you.
Yeah, I guess everybody does. But it wasn't that early. It wasn't David Bowie was a bit before my time in a way. I mean, I'm in a couple of years. 66. So I mean, I guess really it's like punk was more like really the kind of 10 when I was 10, 11, 12. Kind of punk was sort of happening in 76, 77, 78.
Yes.
So yeah. I mean, in fact, I was a bit young punk. I kind of missed that. So it was more of a post-punk kind of. That was but it still is in a way for me. That's still the most interesting period of music that I always go back to all the time. Is kind of like 79, 80, 81, 82.
Yes.
All that music around there is just when I really kind of switched on. I mean, originally, as I say, I was a bit young for the Pistols and things like that, but probably the Jam were like, they were like my big sort of band for me when I was like sort of 14, whatever, 13, 14.
And were your parents at all musical? Did they have a musical influence on you when you were growing up?
No, not at all.
So did you grow up in Wigan? Was it Wigan that you?
Yeah, it's a good old Wigan.
Yes, and you didn't have any older brothers or sisters who gave you sort of a musical influence at all?
Yeah, I had an elder sister, but she doesn't do anything musical. My younger brother, Paul, was always like sort of doing bits and pieces on guitar and into music as much as I was. But I guess I don't know if he was kind of following what I was into as well. So I didn't really have anyone to kind of sort of emulate or whatever, really.
Yes, because in my sort of little world stuck in East Anglia, it was kind of most people just played a lot of sport. There wasn't that many people into making music and being in bands. Was music quite a big thing in the kind of Wigan area at that stage?
Yeah, I mean, I met the bass player of the Railway Children, Stephen, at school. So we were at school, and I was in other bands at school, but I wasn't like, I did try to do some kind of sports stuff like rugby and things like that, which is Wigan famous for, at school. But I always kind of gravitated more towards music and art and stuff like that. So I was one of those kind of people rather than sort of sports side of stuff. But yeah, so I was in like kind of even at sort of middle school, high school, in just kind of school bands and things like that. So I was involved in music. But as I say, when I met Stephen, who played guitar at the time, actually didn't play bass. We kind of really hit it off and had very similar musical taste. So I was, I spent a lot of time going around to his house and just, getting up to no good and playing guitar and listening to music and stuff. So that was a big part of, I think, early years, really.
And how did the guitar come into your world? Did you save up for a paper round and purchase a guitar, or did you have an uncle?
Yeah. I mean, everyone seems to have those stories, don't they? Like the first cheap kind of K guitar, whatever it was in those days. Just some sort of. I think I still remember it. She was like just a little acoustic, but I think, as I say, going back to the Jam and things like that, that's what really turned me on to that. I wanted as soon as I got into them, I really wanted to get a Rickenbacker and stuff like that, but obviously couldn't afford it, and just kind of worked my way up from very cheap guitars and got something a bit better each time, kind of traded things in and, bought and sold stuff, and eventually did end up getting, a Rickenbacker. But I think it was the Jam, and then by through them things like the Who and all the '60s bands, and obviously the Beatles. So it was all about guitar. I mean, that was so that was the instrument you wanted to play and to have.
Yes. And what was the first gig you went to?
Ooh, I think it was a jam actually.
That's...
That would have been. I think it was Preston. I think it was. I don't know what year it would have been. Like '79 or something like that. Quite young.
Yes, blimey. There you go. So when you got to 1982, you were 16. Did you stay on to do A levels at that stage?
Well, I did art at Wigan. I did like a foundation course.
Right.
So again, just sort of surrounded by, that was again like a very post-punk kind of period. So lots of goths and there's a lot of really good record stores actually in Wigan that had like loads of alternative kind of like post-punk type stuff like Joy Division, Bauhaus, and The Cure, really big, and I just remember all those bands. Being on a kind of foundation art course there, and just having the big hair and the big overcoat, and just that was the whole sort of scene at that point.
Yes, absolutely. And then 83, this is a very interesting year, isn't it? The Smiths come along. Did the Smiths have any influence on you at this stage when you suddenly saw Johnny Marr and then saw Morrissey and hearing the lyrics? Because I find sort of that period, because there's the punk period, then there's that sort of post-punk, but then the Smiths come along. It feels like there's a new chapter that suddenly opens up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, again, that was one of the first. Well, I guess a few years later, but I remember going to seeing them in Blackpool about around that time, like the first album. And yeah, I mean, no, they became like I mean, you can probably tell from our music that the Smiths were definitely one of the main influences. They just kind of brought together all of those things that I was, like the Beatles and the Byrds, especially, who were like a big influence on me, like Roger McGuinn,
Yes,
guitar playing. But Johnny Marr incorporated loads of those influences, in such a brilliant way. But at the same time, it's kind of weird. We have a kind of weird mix. But I was also I had strong influence by things like The Cure and Echo and the Bunnymen and Teardrop Explodes and then kind of Joy Division, New Order, kind of, which was a different type of music, a bit more kind of angular and kind of post-punk rather than sort of that kind of very melodic Byrds type.
yes.
But I think definitely they were a really big influence, and probably around about the same time when R.E.M. came out, they were the other sort of really big influence on me. Kind of again certain overlap with the Smiths, but coming from kind of a different angle, like that kind of American thing. So I think at the time the first R.E.M. album, Murmur, of which I can't remember actually what year was it. Was it 83 or 4? 83.
Yes.
Or was
Did it have Radio Free Europe on?
Yeah, Radio Free Europe, yeah.
Yes.
That was a really and the second album, Reckoning. Those two albums, especially me and Stephen, as I say, we were just like kind of hanging out a lot and listening to those. I mean, I'm actually I bought a cassette player recently. It's actually quite hard to get hold of them these days, but I've got loads of cassettes from that period, lots of demos that we did. Prior to being the Railway Children, we had like a couple of other different names, but listening back to those demos, like they're very they're more kind of, I would say, like kind of Pure or Echo and the Bunnymen kind of influence than probably the Smiths or R.E.M. But there's elements of that. I posted a demo actually on our YouTube channel recently, a couple of weeks back. But you can hear that it's definitely got a lot of that jangle in it that's kind of was coming from that. I think more R.E.M. really, but definitely elements of the Smiths as well. I didn't really. I really liked Morrissey as a lyricist and and sort of as a performer, but I never really connected with him personally. I think I connected more with Johnny Marr as just on a musical level, but I connected definitely on a personal level with Michael Stipe and R.E.M. And I think, which and you can definitely hear that in our music. I think that so it was kind of like a mixture of those. Definitely, those two influences came to the fore later on as a kind of synergy between those two sort of things. But but all the bands I've mentioned are all kind of mixed.
And what about people like Neil Young? And sort of, and then we got that kind of new Paisley scene that started to appear in the.
Well, Paisley Underground was a massive. Yeah, that was a massive influence on me as well. Like Rain Parade, and, Dream Syndicate, all those American bands that kind of came along immediately after R.E.M. kind of appeared. Especially things like Rain Parade, I was really into. And Lex Active, Don Dixon, which he produced some of the early R.E.M. stuff as well.
Yes.
The IRS stuff. Is it Don Dixon? Not Don Dixon. What's his name? Singer from Lex Active, I can't know.
Yes.
That's correct, actually.
But there was also then.
I have to Google it, actually.
And then there was people like Green on Red that came along a little bit later.
Green on Red was another one, yeah. I love the Gravity Talks. Green on Red, I love that single. But yeah, Long Riders, I remember going and seeing those.
It was gorgeous. So when you got to the end of your art foundation course, which would have been 1984, had you finished the course, and is this when the band starts?
I'm terrible on dates. I don't even know if I was actually. I mean, I went to uni after that, so I don't know if I was at uni at 84. I have to work it out. It was around that. It was around that time anyway, and that's when all those bands were kind of appearing, and I think Olga Whistle Test was still showing R.E.M. and people playing live coming over, and they were doing so I was watching all that stuff, and it's kind of I mean, I'm missing out huge amounts of like what we were up to as a band. I mean, throughout sort of. Again, when I got these demo tapes out, there's no dates on anything. I can't be really specific about when we were recording stuff. But it must have been sort of 84, 83, 84. We were still active, like around Wigan. We'd started gigging. I was doing. I'd got together with Brian and Guy in Wigan as well, who are from Wigan. I think we all met at. Used to be a club called Wigan Pier Club, famous by George Orwell. It used to be like a disco down there with club, where everybody would go, and that was a really great meeting place. And that's when me and Stephen met Guy and Brian, and that's when we kind of formed, got together and actually started gigging around Wigan, and actually recording demos, and eventually we sort of branched out to Manchester and started doing gigs there as well.
Yes.
But as you're saying, like I mean, this was simultaneously. I was actually doing a degree a bit later, and was travelling up back to Manchester to rehearse and to do gigs and stuff. So it was a busy time.
Yes, it's a classic one. Where were you doing your degree, by the way? What was your subject?
It was graphic design. That's why I was doing that's why I ended up, or why I was interested in doing the sleeves and the record sleeves and stuff for the band.
Right.
That's actually what I was studying. So, and I think some of them worked out okay.
Yes. Were you quite influenced by people like Barney Bubbles and what was your sort of interest in graphic design? Who were your go-to people that you loved?
Oh God, Neville Brody, I think at the time was like a really big one. in the 80s. He did the face and things like that.
Yes.
So he was the big sort of typography sort of guru at the time. But obviously Peter Saville is a big influence with all the factory. I mean, obviously that was like a dream come true for if you're doing graphics, and then we found ourselves on factory by age 5, age 6. So I could go down to the offices in Palatine Road and just take handfuls of records out of the. They used to have like just all the everything that they had was like lots of stock. Like they'd have like 20 or 30 of each album just in rack, so you could just go in and sort of take 3 or 4 of each, Blue Monday or whatever, and just
yes, walk off with them.
Yeah, just walk off them. Yeah, absolutely. So that was great being able to do that. And I got to. Did actually get to meet Peter Saville at one point with Tony Wilson, which was very nerve-wracking as well.
I would imagine. So did you present quite a demo tape that you sent around the record labels at that stage?
Yeah, I mean, following on from what I was saying before, about branching out from Wigan, we started doing some gigs around some sort of small kind of clubs and pubs. I'm trying to think of the names of places used to play in Manchester. Well, I'll probably get all the names wrong now. But yeah, we started doing that, for a while, and actually, well, we had a few false starts and stuff, but we ended up with hooking up with Colin Sinclair at the Boardwalk, and that's really when everything kind of took off then, because he was just starting the Boardwalk Club, which went on to be like a real kind of. I mean, when we met him, it was literally just a shell. It was like an old cinema.
Yes.
And we used to just rehearse on the stage there and he totally gutted it and turned it into a club, into the Boardwalk, and had rehearsal rooms downstairs. And that was like a real kind of meeting place for all the bands in Manchester. So, like we'd be in a rehearsal room next to the Happy Mondays and a certain ratio. Stone Roses would be in, you'd get Marquis Smith from the Fore would be walking around. It was just like basically everybody in Manchester was in there either rehearsing, or you had a bar upstairs as well. So they're either rehearsing or having a drink at the bar.
My God.
So you can imagine, like just walking into that. I mean, it wasn't there when we met Colin. We kind of watched that grow up from a shell into what he made it into, very over a period of a couple of years, But and obviously he was using the money that he got from managing us and getting publishing deal and etc. whatever, to kind of put that into the club to develop it as well.
Yes.
But yeah, being in that was, I mean, we used to rehearse right at the top of the Boardwalk, next to James. James had a room next to us.
Oh, yes.
So, that was a really exciting place to be, and just bumping into all those different people, and, just seeing, just sort of that whole kind of atmosphere. That was a great sort of great place to be.
Yes, I could imagine. So then you signed for Factory, obviously, and you got your first single.
Well, you don't. Well, yeah. Signing is probably not the right word. You don't actually. No one ever actually signed for Factory. You just met Tony and sort of shook hands and said, "Let's split everything 50-50." And there was nothing. We never actually had a contract with them. I don't think anyone did.
No, this is true. This is it.
Yeah.
But then you got number 6 in the UK indie chart. So this was a good start, wasn't it? The things were looking really positive before you got the album out, Reunion Wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And you got on the kind of radar of John Peel and Janice Long quite quickly, didn't you, as well?
Yeah, we were quite lucky to do quite a lot of sort of. I think a lot of them are on Spotify actually. The Radio 1 sessions. Used to go down to the Maidavale studios a lot, record them down there. But yeah. I mean, I lose track. There's so many different DJs that we kind of did sessions for. I mean, John Peel, was obviously, he was the guy that you wanted to attract and get his interest. and yeah, we got a lot of good, healthy support from the kind of indie scene at that point.
Yes, because you did your first Peel session or Made of L studio session. That was in November 1986. So your first single had just come out. So obviously you went down, had Dale Griffiths from Mott the Hoople producing you as well, didn't you? So can you remember?
Yeah.
Can you remember that session?
No, I didn't know that fact actually. Or maybe I did at the time. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Probably Mott the Hoople. Maybe at the time Mott the Hoople wouldn't have registered with me. I don't know, because I was, as I say, I think coming from that kind of post-punk generation, I had a kind of like maybe not a very good attitude towards anything pre-punk.
Oh,
it was like
right.
anything pre-punk was kind of hippie and kind of not, maybe so Mott the Hoople at the time. Maybe I wouldn't have been that interested in, but yeah. So maybe for that reason, it didn't really register. But yeah, no, I mean, I like some of the tracks now. So yeah.
Yes, because you did 4 songs, didn't you? Consider, Then in Any Other Town, Listen On, Big Hands of Freedom. Did you find, was songwriting and sort of creating, these tracks, was that coming together quite easily at that stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I say, when I look back on some of these cassettes that I've got, that I'm probably going to try and release some of the recordings if I can clean them up a bit. I'd actually written a lot of songs, quite a few songs up to that point. So it wasn't as if I kind of just wrote those for the first Factory album. You know what I mean? There was probably, I don't know, 30 or 40 songs I'd written before that, at least, maybe more. That I just kind of that ended up just getting binned basically, or not used. And obviously, I think as a lot of writers say, you kind of got to go through the sort of your early kind of meanderings, as a writer, to get to something. I think by the point we got to a general sound, that's when it started to feel like, oh yeah, this is starting to sound like, we have a sound of our own, or it's kind of gelling in some way.
Yes.
And so, but yeah, that wasn't the first song I wrote. That was probably like to say 30 or 40th song I'd written.
So with a song like Brighter, can you remember how that one came together?
Yeah, that actually was actually one of those kind of happenstance type things that happened in the studio. We kind of went into the studio with a half-formed idea. It was a bit kind of dangerous, actually, to do that. We went into with Mike Johnson, who was like New Order's engineer. Sort of went in, and to be honest, it was kind of a little bit half-formed, but it just kind of came together in the studio. Just kind of maybe the adrenaline, and I think it went through some quite big changes lyrically and even like sort of the arrangement in the studio. And once we had that kind of marimba loop going, that kind of really triggered a lot of ideas. So yeah, but I like that. It's kind of like where you're forced to kind of. I think there's quite a few bands that do that go into the studio without any clear ideas and they just write in the studio. I think New Order do that as well. As one example, but there's many others. But it's like it either works. I've done it. I did it after that once or twice, and it was a disaster. Where you go in and you kind of half-formed idea, and but you just end up with a half-formed idea at the end. And it doesn't really happen. I think there was one. In fact, we did a track with it ended up as the B-side of In the Meantime. I think it's called Second Nature
Yes.
for Virgin. And we went to a residential studio and spent, I don't know, we spent quite a lot of money on that track, and it was going to be a single, but I went in and it just wasn't fully formed, and then it didn't. I still like this. I still like what came out, but it's like an album. It's like either a B-side or an album track, really.
Yes.
But whereas prior to, I don't know, something happened while we were in the studio recording it, and it kind of, which is kind of a magic kind of thing. As I say, that's brilliant when that happens. But I really just had like a kind of vague outline when I went in, and it came out kind of as it's recorded.
Yes, because then you do a Janice Long session, don't you, in '87? Was that much different of a sort of experience to a John Peel session, or was it just like, oh, we're going down, we're just doing Janice Long? Because this one you've got, it's a live. Is it quite live as well?
I don't. To be honest, I have very vague recollections of all the sessions, but I didn't really. To me, it's like the name of the DJ made no difference. It was just you go down to the studio, you've got some songs you're going to record, you record them. It just happens to be for John Peel or Janice Long or whoever, I mean, I don't think you take a different approach based on the DJ, you know what I mean? You just go down, do your thing, whatever you have that you want to do.
Yes.
I didn't kind of make any, I didn't have, different approaches for different shows or whatever. It was just, hey, turn up, play some songs. And,
yes. And were you at all influenced with a lot of those other kind of the more indie bands that had appeared, like the June Brides, Yeah, Yeah, No, the C86, the world of people like the Wedding Present? Did that kind of interest you, or were you feeling a bit more still? Your heart was on the West Coast.
Yeah, I think I may have bought the first June Brides album at the time. I think I liked one of the singles. But yeah, I wasn't. I didn't like the Wedding Present or all the shambling bands. I think we call them at the time.
Yes, that's right, the shambling.
No, I really would struggle really to sort of recall any tracks by any of those bands. I think I was really kind of focused on the kind of Paisley Underground bands, what was happening in the States. So for me, that was just much more kind of exotic and interesting rather than kind of someone from Bradford or or Wigan even. It was I just found that, and especially we signed to Virgin America after Factory, so we ended up going out to LA and doing all sorts of rock starry things, considering who we were and our position. We did some really kind of crazy things, and I don't know whether that was good or bad, but
how did you manage to get sort of, because I've come across, I mean, it was Lou from the Red Guitars. I think their first album came out. I think that was
I really like the Red Guitars, actually, their first album.
So Slow to Fade was on whatever label, and then they got signed to Virgin. And I think when they were
actually, no, it's the Virgin album I like. I think it's the Virgin album I like. I think it is the Virgin album. It did have a different singer.
I'm not sure, but I think that was the one that they found they weren't enjoying anymore because the record label was giving them quite a lot of pressure. Suddenly, they didn't feel like they were making a record that they wanted. It was more like the pressure of a major after being on an indie. So how did you find that kind of from a handshake with Factory to suddenly being on Virgin America, sort of having a few more people looking at you as needing to write that next hit single?
I think that was the problem with us. That we're probably looking back, probably should have stayed on Factory for a little bit longer. But but there was very much a push from management, and I don't know, and it's easy to get caught up in that as young guys, saying, hey, you've got to get on a major and people are interested, because, after that initial kind of burst of sort of success on Factory and the indie charts and stuff, then you have all the majors coming up from London to Manchester to see, who they're going to sign next and stuff. So we got caught up on all that.
Yes. And that sort of political period in the 80s. I mean, obviously very early was the Falkland War, then we had the miners' strike, then Greenham Common. A few years later, we had Red Wedge. Did that kind of political time of, Billy Bragg, the Redskins, Attila the Stockbroker, did, Paul Paul Weller and, the Style Council doing all those Red Wedge tours. Did that kind of come into your consciousness at all, or were you not that kind of engaged in it?
Yeah, I mean, it did. I mean, Billy Bragg did, and Paul Weller to some extent, although I'm not a huge Style Council fan. It was a massive jam, but then, Style Council, not so much. Yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, Billy Bragg was probably the kind of, trendiest, if you want to call it that, the sort of out of that group of people and why. But yeah, I mean, I didn't particularly want to get sort of drawn into kind of like party politics and stuff.
Yes,
in that way.
Yeah, it was kind of in our faces, wasn't it, though? It was the Thatcher's Britain, which was kind of in the stock market and
yuppies.
The yuppies, loads of money,
yeah.
tell Sid, buy some shares in our sort of utilities. It was kind of quite relentless, the council houses being sold off. I just wondered how that affected you. And also 87, major moment, the Smiths break up, that kind of glorious 5 years, 83 to 87. And then suddenly ecstasy comes along, and there's suddenly a new wave of 16 to 18-year-olds who are looking for the next new band. And I just wondered what it's like as an artist, thinking, oh, that's a bit tricky. They're suddenly taking ecstasy. There's a guy called Gerald. There's that Chicago house sound. And suddenly, bands thinking, God, they want us to sound like a dance record now. So I just wondered what it was like when you were on a major, kind of going in and starting to write a new album.
Yeah, I mean, I think, definitely there was a kind of, maybe not, I think it was like sort of 89, probably. It felt like that was really taking hold. I mean, I think we did in 88, we did our first Virgin Recurrence, the first album. And it still felt like, kind of, I don't know, that we were still in that kind of era of, in that particular era of guitars and that kind of music. But I think that, there was definitely kind of a whole shift, isn't it? As soon as kind of Baggy came out with, and the Mondays, we were rehearsing with the Mondays next door to us for a few years, and playing football with them. So they really put their time and built it up, but eventually when they went big with Baggy and stuff, it was definitely. I mean, it happens, doesn't it? You had punk, and then you had post punk, and then you have all these different, and that felt like a shift of gears and shift of music style, which is difficult, because then all the shambling bands and all the C86 bands, and it's like, where do they fit in? All of a sudden, they don't want. People have moved on to like more dance kind of.
Yes.
In England, anyway. I mean, it doesn't necessarily translate to anywhere else outside of the UK, but.
Well, I know bands like, haven't spoke to them, like the Mighty Lemon Drops and the Primitives were like, no one wants another record from us. No, even the fans aren't interested. The critics or the writers aren't going to bother with us. And suddenly it's like, do anyone want another, Mighty Lemon Drops album? And it's a bit like, oh dear, no one does, do they? It's really tricky. I kind of didn't realize the difficulty that people go through, the existential angst of it, of going, oh dear, we're not there. And I think, it's interesting because with some artists, and I mentioned David Bowie, they had that kind of moment in the 70s where they're absolutely on it. And then in the 80s, another decade, you can see that they're even struggling with the what do I do next kind of thing. I'll get this producer, I'll get that sound, this is what and suddenly you think, oh, you were leading and not bothered about anything, and then suddenly you become conscious and you're now following the trend, and it's like, oh, it's a bit embarrassing. And then you find, again, Bowie does find his way a bit, but it's still a bit hit and miss up until Black Star, but it is kind of interesting to see how different that was from the 70s onwards. Yeah,
I mean, I think in some ways, looking back over different bands, I mean, I think every band has their heyday, and even though they may be around for like Bowie or Stones or whatever for years and decades after that, they very rarely capture that kind of zeitgeist of where they totally. they totally line up with what's going on, and they just kind of epitomise the times or whatever. I mean, I think that only really happens
Yes, it is
once.
it's like a planetary kind of moment, isn't it? The planets do just literally come if you're lucky. And obviously, so when you were with Recurrence, did you tour with R.E.M at that stage in America?
Yeah, we basically the A&R guy who signed us, who knew Tony Wilson. His name's Michael. I think he actually, he went on to some big artists after us. Gwen Stefani, I think, he was involved with. Name Michael. That's going to kill me. A terrible name. But anyway, he was an A&R from Virgin America, and he signed us, and he knew Tony. And he also knew R.E.M, knew all the guys from R.E.M. So all those things came together. He got us to sign the Virgin, to start working on this, Recurrence, and also started talking about, maybe we can do some dates in Europe, with R.E.M, kind of promoting it, which came off, which was great.
And what was it like seeing this band who were beginning? Because I did an interview with Miles Copeland, and it was like they were big, weren't they? They were so big, R.E.M, at that stage. I mean,
they were massive. Massive. They hadn't at that point. It wasn't until Losing My Religion that they really went massive mainstream. But they were massive on an indie level, and definitely, and on counter alternative, whatever you want to call it. On that level, they were probably one of the biggest bands, as big as the Smiths.
Yes.
So to get to play with them, it was on the Document tour. So again, that album was the one I loved, which was the big single on that. That was just kind of boggling for us to be supporting them in Paris, and I think in Utrecht in Holland, and I'm trying to think about a couple in Holland, Germany, Dusseldorf we did.
So what's it like? Because it was a very short period of time of you playing at the Boardwalk in front of a small crowd to suddenly being part of a juggernaut of a tour with, a massive band with that machinery and industry and the amount of people and, people who have got such interest in, invested in all this. What was it like for you as a sort of an artist walking out there and being part of it?
It took a little bit of adjusting because, as you say, like you're kind of like starting off, you're an indie band, and then all of a sudden you're supporting R.E.M or being in Virgin America's offices in LA and go to the Chinese theatre and doing all sorts of stuff, so coming from Wigan to Manchester and doing that stuff, it was all kind of really kind of a sort of whirl of things. I mean, it was just as obviously the 80s. It's but iPhones and stuff. I think no one had decent cameras or anything. So looking back, I really wish I'd taken more photographs. We didn't even really have a proper video cameras. Like I think on the American tour, the first American tour I did with the Heartthrobs, I had like a Cinema 8 camera that I'd take out and kind of film stuff. But what came back from that was really, really dodgy. It wasn't clear footage, it was very blurred and stuff. But yeah, I do wish I'd kind of captured a lot of it. I wish I'd captured shots of being on tour with R.E.M. That would have been great, but we just kind of, it didn't even occur to us. We were so kind of excited about just being there that we weren't thinking about taking photos or anything like that, just sort of getting on with things.
Yes. So the Heartthrobs, had Cleopatra's Grip sort of been released at that stage, or were they still working on that? Because they were on One Little Indian, weren't they?
Yeah. As were the Sugarcubes, that was the tour we did with. Actually, that was the second tour with the Heartthrobs. The first one was with the Sugarcubes of the US, and we played with the Pixies and in Boston, and it was like and we did this amazing gig in Boston. It was like it was us, the Pixies, and the Sugarcubes. Again, it's like that's just dream come true kind of like gig, you know.
Yes. Because this guy,
Uh,
he brought a book out 2 years ago on his kind of his Boston photographs. I have to have a look to see if you're in it, but he was
mm,
saying that every band in Europe and Britain would just go straight to Boston first, play, the gigs. And he was just a young person photographing all these bands, a bit like you,
yeah.
like probably took it all a bit for granted, but thought, well, I'll photograph it because that's my bag. And then
Mm.
30, 40 years later, people go, my God, those photographs are amazing. Do you know who these people are? So,
Yeah. I wish I had a camera.
yes, a 38 millimeter reflex lens. So did
Mm.
you, at that stage, had you played Top of the Pops by then? Had you done?
No, no, that was much later. That was 91. So that wasn't until the second version album that we, when we were kind of we were going through this difficult transition from our original kind of sound with Recurrence and Re the Wilderness, and going to the version second album, which is when Baggy was full tilt. And I think we kind of obviously, if you listen to Native Place, which is the second album of Virgin, there's definitely some influences from that, and there's a lot of synthesizers and the kind of dancier beats and things. Um, but
Yeah. So
yeah, so
how did Every Beat of the Heart? Can you remember how that one came together?
I mean that was very much. I was lucky. I got a flat in Salford, which not quite just a couple few minutes from the city centre. Steve was there as well, so we could get to the boardwalk. We were only like sort of 10 minutes from the boardwalk, but yeah, I mean, I would. That was, I think, as you mentioned earlier, being on a major label like Virgin, that's where and it was the difficult second album. That's where it got trickier. It's like the pressure comes to like you've got to write something approaching a hit or whatever. And so yeah, so I was spending a lot of time just writing and demoing in my flat. We also have like a small kind of demo recording kind of room in the boardwalk as well, next to tagged onto our rehearsal room. And a lot of those recordings actually ended with B-side that we recorded there. But yeah, no, it just ended with as I was the sole writer, I would just spend a lot of time on my own writing songs, basically, and then sort of bringing them along to rehearsals, playing to the band, and then just seeing what kind of stuck. And that was one of them, Every Beat of the Heart. I mean,
Yes.
that always irked me about that song is because everybody was gets that they're lazily kind of say every beat of my heart, which I think Rod Stewart or something. I knew that was a potentially difficult title to use, but I changed it to The Heart, and I thought that song makes it cool because it's like it's detached, it's not mine, it's so it's not corny in that way, but everybody missed that, and they just kind of thought it was a really hacky kind of pop title, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But I mean, that just shows that people don't often read lyrics or even song titles like that. They don't think about it.
Yes. And did you work with, was it Steve Lowell at this stage for the producer?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He'd worked with Gillian Cope. I think he did World Shut Your Mouth, played the guitar on that, which was like an album that I really liked.
Yes.
As I said earlier, I've always been a big Teardrop Explodes fan and Gillian Cope. So, and Steve Powers, who went on to do, they were like a duo, Steve Powers and Steve Paul. Yeah, he went on to do, what's his name? What's that guy? Robbie Williams. Yeah.
Oh, right.
He did Robbie Williams stuff. Yeah, so they were very kind of. He was, they were very sort of high production. I think there was a lot of criticism that it was overproduced. I mean, we made some strange decisions on that record. Like, for instance, we programmed all the drums, which was bizarre. We had a good drummer in Guy, and that was just a kind of again, I think that because that was the style of that time, and dance kind of thing had kind of really taken a grip. So everybody was expected to have like metronomic drums and samples and stuff. You
Yes.
know, nobody wanted to hear a real drummer sort of thing. You know, which I really regret doing that because
It's interesting because there was a documentary made on the Wedding Presents album, George Best, and there was this real thing about the drummer and the producer, and it gets really sticky within the narrative of the film. And you have to see it to believe it, really. But there's almost a message that gets flashed up about, it must be some legal thing that just comes up. So, so the drummer gets removed from the project and the album, and they get another one in. So you think, God, I thought that was just a bit of a shambolic band. I didn't realize the drummer was such a sort of key part of that album. And then I've been interviewed members of like the woman from the Go-Betweens, Lindy, and she had a horrendous time with being a drummer with the producer who destroyed her, and also Patty Shelmer, I think, who was in the Courtney Love album band Hole, and she, gets broken by the producer who destroys her in the studio, and she ends up leaving and becoming, an addict and homeless.
Sure.
It's almost like, my God, so it really is quite horrendous. There's even a film,
Yeah, I mean, guys think you're taking. I think the fact that he didn't have the drum. I mean, he did. I mean, he got involved in drum programming and stuff, but it's just insane that people were doing that. It's like, there's just no reason to do it. I think, actually, I know one band I like, 10,000 Maniacs.
Yes.
Like the In My Tribe album, that was a lot of that was all programmed. Again, there's no reason. That was just the sort of, and I think Wish and Share was the album before that, which again, that's another real key album that I love. That was all live drums, but then they kind of shifted a lot of programming and stuff. It just became like a fashion at the time, I think. That,
yes. I think was it Pete Asher who produced the 10,000 Maniacs, one of their albums? It was.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
But I think he
did In My Tribe.
So when I did the interview with Lindy from the Go-Betweens, it was like the producer said, right, we can have, because she was a partner of the lead singer, not Grant, the other one, Robert Forster, and the producer said, we can have.
I love the Go-Betweens, by the way. They're one of my. They're another like key.
But the producer sort of held them like, you can have this with your partner playing drums, but it will be like this, and it's not going to be very successful. Or you could have it with this kind of sound, and DJs will play it all over the world, and you will become successful. So you have to make that decision, And I think, yeah, it was quite grim,
It's completely insane. It was utter bullshit, basically, from producers. Saying that, like, it's just no one cares. I mean, people listening to records don't care if it's. I mean, the thing that's annoying is that, like, say, especially on, like, say, on Native Place, you're programming drums to sound like they're real, which is totally pointless. If you're going to use a drum machine, like, say, Blue Monday or something, sounds like a drum machine, that's fine. You're not trying to fool anyone. But or again, the 10,000 Minute stuff. You're trying to program it to make it. But you're really just doing it to have like a very grid-based drumming with no feel.
Yes.
So really, you're trying to be like what's at least kind of less offensive than a real kick, because that's too. It's too lively or whatever. So I think that's what we've got. Which is the only reason why you would say that to the Go-Betweens. Like, why would you there's no reason for them to have programming drums. It just doesn't fit the music. That's all. I don't think you want feel. You want lively performances, not programming. But yeah, I think everyone. At that period, like 89, 90, 91, just because of changing styles, and then a lot of the bands at that time, were coming under that pressure from the record companies to smooth out their sound and kind of sequence it up and get some samples in there, and baggy beats sort of, and and I think I think we sort of gave into a lot of those things, which I wish we hadn't done. on
Yeah.
its native place. But having said that, a single like "Every Breathe a Heart" that was still and still is, our most well-known single, our biggest hit, if you like. I think it was number 20 in the charts, and then we did Top of the Pops or something. So yeah, so you can't be too harsh, but it's not. But it's not the kind of track that I really listen to. I much prefer Recurrence or Ring in the Wilderness as an album.
Yes. Well, yeah, absolutely. Did your management ever try and sort of push you into areas which were difficult as an artist to think, from where you were coming from, to pushing you away from the R.E.M world and the Paisley world to, support, being put into sort of a different category of shiny pop artists?
Yeah, I mean, I think as soon as you're on a major label, then it's not so much management, but it's just implicit in being there. It's like that like you've had your advances and stuff, and have to be paid back, and meetings with A&R men and how's it going, and yeah, definitely, that's always in the back of your mind. I mean, I think the day, even in the sort of 89, 90, early 90s, the days of like, so R.E.M had like 5 or 6 albums, that weren't, I don't know actually at the time how big a sellers they were, but they weren't massive global until they sort of broke through. But but that kind of steady 5 or 6 album thing, it had kind of started to disappear even at that point.
Yes.
So there was a lot of pressure even by the second album. It's like, okay, we've done one now, and there wasn't a big hit on that, so you really need to do it on this one, or and ultimately, we had "Every Beat of the Heart" was a minor hit, but going into like the album after that, which would have been the third album, and that's actually when EMI bought Virgin out at that point, which is in '92. But yeah, at that point, it's very much like, what have you got? Have you got an off the shelf hit that we can? If not, you're not really going to be making a third album at that point, So
Yes.
it's a completely different. I think that's a completely different trajectory to perhaps bands in the early '80s who might have had a bit more leeway to do 2 or 3 albums, even by then. And now it's just got worse, hasn't it? I think you probably don't even get past your first album now if you don't have a hit. You're not making a second album, I don't think.
Yes. But did the Seattle grunge, because you mentioned the Pixies and there was Throwing Muses on 4AD, and I remember they did a tour together in '89, and then you had Bleach, didn't you, from Nirvana, coming out in about '89 as well. And then obviously 90, 91, 92, suddenly it's all kind of Seattle grunge. Did that kind of throw a spanner in the works of what you were looking to do next, or had you by then sort of felt done?
Yeah. So really, yeah. This is the thing. I think that kind of as I said before, that kind of that one point where you really line up with the stars and everything was it was like 86, 87 around that time would have been the 86. That sort of time. That's when you felt like really comfortable. But then you had baggy, and then after that, quite quickly you had grunge. So it was two shifts. And obviously it was very heavy grunge. So I mean, that's there was elements of kind of baggy that kind of I could kind of get into. I think Brighter was kind of like a dancey kind of dance elements to it. You know what I mean? So it wasn't a million miles away. Is sort of like incorporate some of the things because I was interested in that kind of thing. But grunge, and sort of that heavier side, it was I don't know. Yeah, you just felt like things were going in a different direction again, and I'm sure a lot of bands. I think that the focus went definitely obviously to the States for that, and away from maybe the UK.
Yes. Did you ever get did you ever get an offer to support Take That?
Well, that was actually I think that was probably 92, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, this goes back to pressure from management and record companies, but that's basically why we split up with our management, because they wanted us to. They basically gave us an ultimatum and just said, you either support Take That at GMX, I think it was, in Manchester, or that's it. When and I just said, no, I'm not doing it. And so that we called it a day there. But it had happened. I think it supported OMD. We did NEC and did different things.
Yes.
Some big sort of venues with them, but it felt like this is just completely wrong. The completely wrong audience that we're playing with, for me anyway.
Yes.
And then obviously Take That. It's just like, no, I'm just going to draw the line there. But yeah, our manager, i.e. Colin, I don't know. I think he just always thought that I was being awkward. It was like he kind of. I don't know if he ever said it to Dre, but I think it was. He said like, "Oh, you can write that kind of music, or you can write that big kind of hit, but you don't want to, or you're being awkward." It's like, well, I don't know. It's. I don't really want to be that kind of band, I mean, he would have been probably happy if I'd started writing Take That type music,
Yes,
that would have made him happy,
Which was tricky because I don't know when Night Swimming had that still to be, and Everyone Hurts. Is that still to come in '92?
Yeah, that's all around that time. Yeah.
Yes, it would have been hard to sort of go on the Gary Barlow way than the Michael Stipe, really, wouldn't it?
I mean, you could see elements of it in that in Native Place, album with the synthesizers, and obviously Everybody at the Heart was very poppy, but they just wanted to go further in that way, But I was still, as I say, if you listen to it though lyrically and stuff, it's still kind of trying to be a bit kind of miserable and a bit sort of melancholic or awkward or whatever. You know what I mean? It's not. I was definitely pushing against being like just, I don't know, this kind of out and out kind of pop writer or whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's the same. Maybe manager was right in that I could do that, but I didn't want to. But I did want to be a guitar band, I didn't want to be a synth kind of pop. I mean, I think one of the as they got towards the end of that Virgin period after No Place, moving into the album after that, it was like, get rid of the band, which is the classic move by the record company. It's like, just get rid of the band. We don't need them. Just you. I think they wanted me to. I think the term they used is like, go and sequence up an album with Ian Brody from the Lightning Seeds.
Right.
Like, we'll put you in the studio with him, and you just sequence up an album. It's a sequence. Everything's just computerized, and you know what I mean. And this is so far away from where I started, which was kind of like real music, real musicians, and the guitars, and I mean, I think Recurrence, for me, I really like that album. I think that was really, I think In the Meantime is still like one of my favorite songs. I think that's close to kind of perfect for me, what I wanted to do. So I would have liked to have done more of that, but I was being pushed into getting rid of the band and sequence up a pop hit, so yeah.
Yes, God, that's so.
I was kind of relieved or happy in some ways to get away from that,
Yes, it was kind of weird because I did an interview with that guitarist from Mud, Rob. He was the one who used to wear slightly flamboyant clothing. And,
but then he wrote what's her name?
Kylie
Minogue's hit, didn't he?
Yeah. So after Mud, he worked with Paul Oakenfold, I believe, and he tries to write these kind of dance hits, and he did one with Kylie, but he's that's his thing, that he's trying to find that next dance record to give to some young artist to sort of get clubby with.
I think writing for other people is fine. I mean, I could do things like that, and I have done that actually. I mean, I once I mean, I actually moved to Japan in the early 2000s, and then had like 5 or 6 years of writing songs for other people in Japan. I was writing real out and out pop songs for J-pop and all sorts of stuff, and manga and things like that. So I don't mind doing it for other people, but I didn't at that time want to stand there and write and sing that kind of music. That just felt a bit naff to me.
Yes. So did you sit down as a band in like 92 and just say, the quote, Jim Morrison, this is the end? Or did it just not have that sort of finale? It just kind of just stopped?
It was definitely the Take That gig was the end. That was it. I think. Well, actually, no, it wasn't. We did sort of limp on a bit after that, without any management. I think we did some gigs after that. I think we had it in our heads because we had the Virgin album and the single, which had done, Every Beat in the Heart. We thought, we can maybe sort of continue and something will happen, but without management, it was very difficult. And obviously, as we say, things were moving in a completely different direction. Britpop was starting to come along as well. And,
yes.
And so again, things are just constantly changing. And I think, we kind of failed to, although, it's kind of weird actually, because at the time, well, actually much earlier when I went to the States, one of the tours, I think it might have been the Heartthrob one, which was in 89 or something. Someone who was linked with Polydor would give me all the Jam CDs because I wanted them all on CD, because it had gone from vinyl to CD at that point. And then I got really back into the Jam at that point, and I was starting to write much kind of more aggressive kind of rock songs, which was kind of more in the vein of what Britpop came to be in a way.
Yes.
But it just didn't fit. It didn't fit. And actually, a lot of that stuff ended up on the album that I did on my own, which was Dream Arcade, which is actually quite rocky in a way if you hear that. But a lot of that stuff I'd kind of done. I'd sort of become more. Again, I guess you got like grunge and that, but that was too heavy for me. But so like Britpop and that kind of, but just return to rock, away from programming, drums and samples, just back to playing and stuff, and turning the guitar up and things. But I probably, in some ways, I think got too far away from my melodic kind of roots and acoustic kind of roots in songwriting. I think I probably got a bit too carried away with turning the guitar up on that particular album.
Yeah, it's quite different. Did you on those kind of? Well, how does a band finish? How do you? Like the name, the publishing, who owns the music, who's got the master tapes? What is that process, or is there not a process?
I think unless there's, unless there's a lot of money involved, there isn't really a process. I think if there's a lot of money involved, then lawyers are involved, and then there's of course, there's a legal process going on. But I think, I'm sure with most of the indie bands, that especially you're talking about, C86 era bands and that, I think it's more like you just fizzle out really, because nobody's particularly keeping tabs on you financially because you're not generating a lot of money. I'm sure it gets more difficult depending on who wrote the songs and stuff and publishing deals and things. I mean, I'd written all the songs, so that was quite clear, sort of clean cut with that and publishing and stuff. But I was kind of like, in a way, the only sort of active. I was only the really only sort of real active. Maybe because I wrote the songs, so I felt like I had to kind of look after things and stuff. I had a website. I knew about all the things to do with PRS and all that kind of stuff. So I had a bit of a process around that, but everyone else just kind of disappeared basically once we split up.
Yes.
Because in a way, really all that's left is a big debt. if you aren't if you if you aren't if you're not selling millions of records, we never recouped on Virgin, so we ended up owing the money.
I think it
not that
happened. Yeah, because Jim Bob from Carter said that EMI said, "Oh, you owe us some ridiculous amount of money, so we'll just keep, every time there's any money, we'll keep putting it against the debt you've got. So you'll never get anything." Is that the same with the material you've done for Virgin? Is it the case that you think, oh well?
As far as actual money from selling records, or streams or whatever, we did. I mean, we did quite a lot of promo videos as well, and each promo video was like 50,000 quid, and so there was just no way we were gonna, not unless you had a sort of global number one or whatever, that you were gonna pay back the advances really on all that kind of stuff, and tour support. Every time you went on tour, they'd pay for you to support R.E.M. or we did a couple of bus tours across the US, which they were paying for. So I guess all that goes on the bottom line.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it was after that, after we sort of fell out with that management. When you don't have management, it becomes very difficult. To sort of do anything really, because unless you're just, there are some, but I think, was it in Spiral Carpets, like Clint, and people like that who are a bit like managers themselves, so they're entrepreneurial types, so they could maybe do both without having their own management. But at that time anyway, as soon as we didn't have a manager, we were just kind of like, the phone stopped ringing, we weren't really doing anything.
So was it a kind of a big decision to make is it a solo album, would you call, Dream Arcade, or?
I guess so, yeah. It probably should be, actually, because it doesn't sound anything like the rest of the road. So I probably should have just done that.
And you work with new different musicians. So did that feel did that sort of inspire you, recording that album?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was actually my wife used to work at a studio called Master Rock in London, in Kilburn High Road. And I was living in London and recorded the album there. But I mean, at that time, that was the height of Britpop, and everyone was in that studio, like Suede and Bunny and Men and Oasis, and you know what I mean. So I mean, you go in and there was just all these Blur. I mean, just anybody you could think of at that time was recording at Master Rock. So that whole time was just it was just a lot of fun, actually, just being around there. So a friend of mine, actually a couple of guys who worked on that album, who mixed and engineered it, worked in the studio, so they were friends of mine, but they were like working with, as I say, with Oasis or, Wade, etc. But it was good, just a bit. It was just good again to be in that kind of sort of happening sort of atmosphere.
Yes, the John Major, Tony Blair years, wasn't it? 97, when we were very optimistic. But then Britpop was going. So what led you to relocate to Japan?
My wife, who was running, with some other people, the Master Rock Studios. We just decided to emigrate for a few years and have a family, and went to Japan.
Yes, blimey, there you go. I've done a few interviews with people in Japan. A member of Gay Bikers on Acid, I think. I think people went to teach English as a foreign language, I think, generally, isn't it? But you kept writing and then sort of got into K-pop, which is probably fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, again, because my Japanese was pretty terrible, actually. So I mean, I've always been involved with computers. Even I mean, I had like a Macintosh. My first one was in about 1989, so probably when I was using it for music and graphics. So very early, really, in things.
My God,
like
you probably had early versions of PageMaker, didn't you? And Quark.
Yeah, Photoshop One and things like that, and you know, Pro Tools. Before it, well, you know, it was actually the software before Pro Tools. So I was doing demos with Macintoshes, and I mean before that I was using. Everybody used things like Atari computers which became Logic later on, and
Yes.
So I was involved in all that, and after I was in the band, I just went back to it because that was my main interest as well as music. I was in advertising and what became new media, and then what became the internet, and I was programming and doing graphics and stuff, which is what I do today, basically. But yeah, being in Japan, it was difficult to do that because of the language. So I had to fall back through some certain contacts on there to see if I could get some music work, and I did it. And I was lucky to be able to do like some songwriting and arranging and stuff for the manga and the J-pop artists, which was you know pretty wild actually, just going to studios in Tokyo and recording stuff at home and then taking it in and then mixing it in big studios, do a little backing track and then get these artists in to sing on it.
Yes. So what was your? Because I just noticed you recorded with every little thing. This is one of. So which was the particular artist that had the biggest hit for you?
Tsuchiya Anna, I think, would have been the one. She was Anna Tsuchiya in English. She was a model at the time. I think if you search, I think it's on YouTube, that one.
Yes.
I did several albums and singles with her. And some of those were like, you know, top 10 singles.
Was that Taste My Beat and Strip Me?
Yeah, but I also did a whole lot of arranging and stuff for her as well, and playing guitar. And but I was writing lyrics. I actually did some lyrics for a manga. Who am I actually got? Which what's the guy from Kiss? Gene Simmons. Yeah.
Oh yes.
He did the vocals for it, and then I think what they called Slipknot, the cover of the song.
Slipknot as well.
Detroit Metal City, that was it. Detroit Metal City was the film. I shouldn't say that. I don't think anybody knows this, but I wrote the lyrics to the song that they did. It's,
Detroit Metal City.
It's actually it's called Buckingham Palace. It was a completely. I think they did it as a single Slipknot or something or whatever. But anyway, yeah, stupid stuff like that.
Excellent. God, you certainly entered another part of your creative process there, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, that was. I think, as I said earlier, like because I was not writing, because I was totally just writing for other people. I was doing lyrics, I was doing arrangements and writing songs, just like all that stuff. But not for myself, you know. So it was quite a new experience. So it was not about self-expression so much. It was more just like having fun doing like completely unrelated styles of music that I would never do for myself.
Well, David Bowie used to often say that he would have been happy to be a writer if he could find someone to sing his songs, but then he found that no one would, so he became a singer. So I guess, it's a similar thing of enjoying writing and then letting someone else.
Yeah, no, it's true. Actually, I mean, I actually wrote. I must have. I think I wrote about 100 songs or something, maybe more. I wrote because they have this thing called Compay, which is like competition in Japan for songwriting. So you basically, some artists will say, "Hey, I want some songs." I think they may do it here as well, and then you get like, I don't know, 20 or 30 writers will all write a song, and then they submit them, and then whoever wins, whatever, they'll select the one they like. And I did tons of that. which is very time consuming. And not so many wins there, but I got a few. But I was mainly probably doing more arrangement and kind of lyric writing and things like that. But it is very hard to sort of take yourself out of the music and then just write
Yes.
to order in the style that someone's asking for. Without, I would always tend to put a bit of a kind of like edge on it, which maybe was too edgy for people, because I was kind of trying to maybe again make it not too poppy or something, working against myself, So, but that's it's very hard to it's very hard to I don't know if that's why people, as you're saying, but David Bowie, why people didn't want to sing those songs, maybe because there was too much of him in it, and then they didn't want to sound like David Bowie, you know what I mean? So there's a knack, I think, of the writer to be able to write for somebody, but sort of not make it sound like you know what I mean? It sounds like them, sort of thing. To sort of get into their head and sort of make it fit them.
Yes. Yes. And then, as we were trucking through the decades, then 2015, 16, do you get the kind of, is like the Magnificent Seven or the return of, do you get the call to reform? What happens in that moment?
I can't remember. I think somebody may have just mentioned on social media, if you thought about doing this and that. I don't know, and people do from time, had been from time to time, and I don't know, just at some point it just stuck and thought, yeah, well, why don't I just give them a call and just see what they're doing if they want to do it. That's 2016, I think, and it just felt. It must be something to do with time, because it just seemed like at that point it exploded. There was loads of people reforming. There was we did that Shine On festival, and there's just tons of bands reforming. So I don't know, must have been something in the air that made people feel like that was the time.
Yes.
I don't know. It was like, like a call to indie bands for that generation to, now's the time to reform. I can't explain why there's something, because I don't know. I feel, maybe I haven't checked, but I would imagine that's died down a bit now, perhaps. But around that period, there seemed to be a lot of, get-togethers and reforming of like mass amounts of bands that you just never would dream would get back together again. All of a sudden reforming, but we did that. Yeah, I mean, it was initially again, we didn't have management, so it was a bit. I was kind of just fielding calls from people and stuff, and we did manage to go. We went to New York and did a kind of festival there, and Germany, and a bunch of stuff around the UK.
Yes.
So it was good fun, actually.
And was that the first time you'd all met since 92?
Yeah. I think it was, actually. Yeah. I think I may have been up to the border one more time after 92, and then after that, I haven't seen anyone since then or really been in touch. As usual, you kind of had enough of each other at that point. So it lasted a lifetime, I think, probably, and then so that was good fun. It lasted about 2 years. We kind of sporadic kind of live dates in London and various other places. And I probably would have continued, actually. I think Guy, the drummer, wanted to continue as well, because we were just having fun doing it, getting a good reaction and stuff. And but the Stephen, the bass player, and Brian basically weren't interested, didn't want to do it. So which is fair enough, they just felt like they'd kind of sort of did what they wanted to do with that sort of get reforming.
Yes.
So yeah, and I think in Japan, actually, I did like a kind of I think there's a video on YouTube. I did a kind of gig with some Japanese musicians doing some Railway Children songs, but definitely like there's something about you can't recreate that. I don't know what it is, but you can't recreate that thing. I've played Royal Children songs with other people as well. But there's something about those other four of us, as you know, that kind of, when we get together and just play, then it sounds like the Royal Children.
Yes.
So, and when I play with someone else, it doesn't sound like, it sounds like something else, or it feels like something else, you know. So that was nice, you know. We just got together. We were actually most of the guys were based up in Wigan or Manchester, and I was in London. So we'd meet and rehearse in Birmingham, just halfway. So we were all driving down the motorway to Birmingham, rehearsing, and then going home again. Which obviously got a bit tiresome, you know, doing that at the weekends. But yeah, you know, just getting together, even on the first rehearsal, just boom, you know, it was like riding a bike, you know, and you just start playing, and you were back. I think because we probably just in the past had rehearsed it so much and played those songs that it's, you know, it's just muscle memory was still there. You could just play without even looking, sort of thing. So yeah, so being able to do that's fun because obviously if you play with other musicians who don't know, then it's actually quite a lot of work in rehearsals trying to get a live set together that kind of works, you know. But I think for that reason, that's why I think when the two Brian and Stephen didn't want to do it anymore, it just kind of the idea of trying to recreate that with some new musicians, I don't know, sort of is not as appealing really. So we didn't play any. I haven't played any gigs after that.
No, I mean. So John, so what status? You're obviously a creative person with your graphic art. Do you still have that kind of musical kind of itch to that you still enjoy writing songs or playing guitar?
Yeah, I mean, I've got the guitars at the back there, but I mean, I play guitar all the time. I think probably the stint of songwriting in Japan probably got a lot of the songwriting urge out of me, because I, you know, just was doing it day in, day out, hundreds of songs for different people. So I don't have as much the drive, I think, to write things these days. And also I think I don't know, it's it was always a difficult decision to do something for the Railway Children or to do something for myself, to do something as Gary Newby. I've never done something as Gary Newby, but to do a solo record, because then it doesn't have to sound like the Railway Children. It can sound, you know, and that's probably the thing I should do if I do anything. You know, I wonder, you know, probably there's no need for another Railway Children record. In some ways, you know, that's kind of what's the word? You know, it's kind of a retro thing. You know, it's set in time, you know, in a way.
Yes.
You know, but listening to new bands, that you know, it doesn't seem to be like the clear sort of movements of music that we had at that time, the sort of late, you know, in the 80s and early 90s. Now it seems a bit, you know, it's just got masses of different types of music. So I find it very difficult but I can hear like elements of that kind of jangly guitar, or, you know, certain things that we were doing. So, you know, you can argue that there's a place for that kind of music still, even though it's not I mean, guitars in themselves aren't really in mainstream music so much anymore anyway. You don't really hear those.
But with streaming, you know, Spotify, you still get a lot of monthly listens. So obviously people are still discovering the band, and not just old fans who want to, you know, there's always young kids out there who are going to be listening to the music for the first time. So, yes, and also the production and everything, you know, it hasn't dated, has it? Particularly, it doesn't have that. Well, you know, it's not too, you know, it's not like prog rock or something like that, which is, you know, it does have a real kind of feeling. I mean, there might be the production on some of the albums, but the songwriting.
Well, I think 80s is there's so many bands now that are aping the 80s sound, you know, or production, you know, and or just even style of song, you know. So
is it the case you've got sort of a catalogue of, you know, potential solo material that is there sort of on your computer that you could go in a studio with some musicians and create a solo album.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I wrote a whole album directly after Native Place for Virgin. Like, you know, that we basically that would have been the third album that got shelved. You know, so all those demos. You know, but it's hard. You know, would I want to? I could. You know, I was toying with this idea the other day, actually. You know, and then I've got all these songs pre the Rebel Children as well, which actually I quite like. You know. Melody wise and stuff, you know, and some of the ideas. But I don't know. Do you re-record those and then release them, or do you just release these demos because the demos have a kind of you know, rough kind of magic to them as well that you can't recapture? So it's like, or do you just ignore all that and then just write new music?
Yes, it's tricky.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually going to. Well, I mean, I've just started actually to put together a Bandcamp page because I think Bandcamp might be, maybe that's the best outlet for things like that.
Yes, that's always a good one, Bandcamp. Oh, you need Cherry Red Records to bring out the entire collection, don't you, with all the rarities and demos, because they're always good at doing those productions, aren't they? Those,
yeah, yeah. Well,
band.
I did. Yeah, I've got like, I did like these things called rarities, like these sort of, they're not official releases because I have to sort of work out what all the licensing thing is and stuff. But you know, there's like a couple of collections of rarities which are like 12 songs or so. You know, that I sort of made available, should we say, like on the internet a while back. So I don't know. They might appear on Bandcamp or whatever. But I think, you know, the only other thing is that, you know, it's like I did get asked, you know, quite a lot to put, do you want to be on this compilation or do you want to do that and stuff? But it gets like tiresome, you know, after a while, because it's just like, it's actually there's actually sometimes a lot of paperwork and stuff and tracking things to do. And it's just like, well, another re-release and stuff to, you know, and you earn like this paltry amount of money from it. So it's just like, what's the point really? You know, it's just, you know, repackage, re-release stuff all the time. I don't know, not that interested in doing it.
Yes. Oh, I know. It's tricky, isn't it? So is it the case that with your back catalogue, is it just still kind of scattered over different labels and different publishers who own what and who owns the masters?
No, it's all on BMG.
Right.
I did just the kind of administration deal with them a while back. So the publishing is just with them. But obviously, mass recording side of things, like who owns the record, you know, that's I mean, the factory stuff's pretty straightforward because it's bands, because there's never any contracts with those stuff. But obviously, Virgin still own all the Virgin things. In perpetuity, probably. I don't know how long that. I think it just goes on forever, that contract.
Yes. There you go.
You know, and then you get things like, was it Taylor Swift and people, they just re-record everything, don't they? And re-release it, you know. But, you know.
That's, yes, I guess.
Yeah. I don't have an audience, that's why I'm not going to go to those lengths, you know.
Yes. So do you think you'll ever play live again, not just just yourself, not just, you know, with a band, because obviously reforming is a whole other gig, but do you ever sort of get a feeling or temptation to?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's definitely something I want to do. It, you know, I think just coming up with, I think it will be like, so, you know, as I say, there's always that question of, is it the Railway Children or is it just do something solo and just, you know, it could be both. I guess you can do both. You don't have to choose, but I wouldn't want to just be kind of like a retro kind of thing though, where you're just always playing old songs and,
yes,
you know, I think, you know, that whole kind of shine on thing when you just go to see all the hits from the 80s, you know, it's not really that interesting to do that. So yeah, it'll all hinge on whether I come up with something that sort of sparks some interest in me to want to record something and put it out. I mean, it's easy now, isn't it, to put stuff out? It's so easy. You just, I've recorded at home and then put it onto Spotify or whatever. It's really easy compared to how it used to be.
Yes, and Bandcamp is the go-to place as well. So I think that is it actually. But yeah, it would be fantastic if you did some solo gigs. But yes,
definitely. I mean, I mean, if I can, it's not easy to find. It's not easy, as I said before, like sort of getting a group of musicians together. That gels, where it works. I think that's one of the difficult things.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens.
I mean, if you could have whispered something to your 16-year-old self starting out, is there anything in particular that you would have gone, oh yes, I would have told them that?
I think just I was probably a little bit kind of shambling, a little bit kind of rough, a little bit lo-fi, a little bit kind of rough and ready in certain things. I wish sometimes I'd have kind of taken more time with some songwriting or some demoing or certain aspect of certain things. I think sometimes, So, but I think I learned that with time. But when I was 16, I think and around about that age, I probably wish, looking back, some of the things I wish I'd kind of like crafted more.
Yes.
But but that was an aesthetic as well back then. Of kind of, it was looking back at some of those recordings are very kind of lo-fi in a way, very, but they have a certain charm as well. So,
And it was, I mean, it's like, oh yes, that was 20 years. And you think, no, God, it was 40 years ago. Blimey. I guess that was when, yes, it's quite tricky, isn't it, really? But yes, well, I hope you get back in the studio or some such thing and record a solo album. I think everyone's, anyone who's creative has always got something there. That, like Bowie's last album, Black Star, was probably one of his most amazing albums ever. But yes, the circumstances were
that's a goal.
That's a goal.
What to aim for. Yeah.
Just kind of pictures. You just need a Tony Visconti, really, don't you?
Yeah, well, that does help having a Tony.
Yeah. We all need a Tony, don't we? And that, dear listener, is going to be the end of the interview. After we just have a few more moments to say goodbye. But anyway, that was me in conversation with Gary Newby to find out more about life in the Railway Children and also, interestingly, life after the Railway Children. So anyway, you can go to the Facebook page and find out some more information, or certainly look at pictures from the golden period. Anyway, this has been the C86 Show. I'm David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived. Aren't you lucky? You can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.